Hey, it's Dr. Brenda, founder of the Gutsy Women Club, where women dare to dream and take bold actions to follow their heart's journey. Hey, please subscribe below if you already subscribed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please pass this site along to your friends who might appreciate it. All right, it's Gutsy Women Wednesday. I'm going to do something different. In fact, I may make this a regular part of Gutsy Women Wednesday. And this all came about because I took a side trip last week to Virginia City, Montana, and I saw this placard there recognizing the contributions by Sarah Bickford. And I got really, really curious about this African American woman who was so integral to Virginia City back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So I started to do a little research and I decided, you know what, I'm just going to share this information with you and maybe we can talk a little bit about how it fits into the structure of what it means to be a gutsy woman. But first, I wanted to mention, there's a little book out called The Book of Gutsy Women, and it's by a couple of people you might have heard about, Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. And they're looking at primarily, famous women who have changed the institution, changed the politics, changed the medical institution. And I'm really looking at the individual person, sort of like, one of the movies that I really loved was Hidden Figures, the African American women scientists, engineers, mathematicians who helped NASA launch their ships to the moon. I love that story, and there are so many hidden figures, so many women out there that we've never heard of. And that's what happened to me last week as I traveled, did my little side trips, and I ran into the placard, and this is a photo image of Sarah Bickford. Okay? So I started to do a little bit of research to find out how somebody born into slavery becomes known as the Water Queen, becomes the owner of a water utility company. How does that happen? So I went back and found it's very interesting because the history changes this comes from some university researchers who have dug into the history and sort of uncovered some things that people didn't know about. So, the dates are off a little bit and the information we have is pretty limited, but this is what I can piece together. So, Sarah was born in Jonesboro, Tennessee, or around that area, and she was born into slavery. She was enslaved by John Blair III, and John Blair was a well-known politician. He struck it rich in the California gold rush, and he was also pro-union, so as the folks in that part of Tennessee were. In 1863, John Blair dies. Now, let's go back to our history books. 1861 is the start of the Civil War, 1861 to 1865. So right in the middle of that war, John Blair dies, and Sarah, her parents are sold off to settle the estate, presumably. So at the age of probably 10 years old, Sarah loses her parents. Her parents are never seen again. So that's the hard reality of what happened to enslaved people in the 1860s. So she goes to live with an aunt, and I'm going to use aunt in quotation marks because they're not really sure if this was her mother's sister or if it's an aunt figure. She goes to live with Nancy Gammon. And in 1870, she's just 17 years old. She makes her way to Montana. So she's brought, Dolly had to make an entrance here. Dolly's all into history. So she makes her way to Montana as a nanny for a gentleman by the name of John Murphy. So she settles into Montana, the Virginia City area, and she marries John Brown. Now, John Brown is an Irish immigrant. He's a white man, and with John Brown, she has 3 children. 2 of the children, both the boys, die at a very young age of diphtheria. Now, those of you of the younger generation, I don't know if you've ever heard of diphtheria, and maybe if you are a parent and you get your kids vaccinated, you have heard of diphtheria. But back in the late 1800s, early 1900s, the death rate, 20% for children under the age of 5. 20%. 1 out of 5 kids would die from diphtheria before they hit their 5th birthday. And that was, diphtheria has almost been eradicated in the United States thanks to immunizations since the 1920s. So she loses 2 of her children at a very young age, and that leaves her with her young daughter, Ava. Now, Sarah does something that is very, very rare. She divorces her husband. And, divorce then wasn't like it is now. So, the numbers were very, very tiny. And divorce was a huge scandal. It was a blemish on you, on your family. So a lot of times it was hidden. So the interesting piece of this is that the original researchers thought that her husband had died, and it was only due to researchers not too long ago discovering that her husband didn't die, they were divorced. And she claimed abandonment, desertion, and cruelty. And the records show that Brown hit her with his fists, a wooden broom, threatened her with a knife, a revolver, and so she was able to get a divorce, which again, very, very uncommon, and she got custody of Ava. Sad thing is that Ava died also at a very young age. They don't know of what, but the fact is that Sarah was left a divorcee. Her children had died, and she was all alone. So in 1883, she marries Stephen Bickford. And he is described as a white farmer and a miner, also has a bit of an entrepreneurial spirit. And with Stephen, they have 4 children. So Stephen buys 2/3 of the local water company. And in the meantime, Sarah takes correspondence classes. So this is the old, you've got online classes now. This is the equivalent of it, where everything is through the U.S. mail. So I'm sure you get your assignments and then you send it back. And that is how you earned some skills, maybe a degree. And so she took correspondence classes in business management, and she worked at the utility company with Stephen. She kept the books. In 1890, Stephen Bickford dies. So her husband dies. So again, she's alone. She's got 4 children. She proceeds to, 10 years later, buy the remaining third of the water company. And so she is now the sole owner of Virginia City Waterworks. And so she's also really one of the people who launched, I guess, the tourism trade. So she bought a building which became known as the Hangman's Building because the vigilantes hanged 5 people there. And at that building, she also, that was her headquarters, she installed a restroom for the wealthy women who were on their way traveling to Yellowstone National Park, which is 15 miles away from there. Smart old woman. So one of the questions may be, how is it that a black woman can marry a white man in the late 1800s, early 1900s? And here's the thing, in Montana and in other states, in Montana, interracial marriage was not outlawed until 1909. So it was perfectly legal. 1909 is when, at least in Montana, where it became illegal. And just a side note, that didn't change until 1967. Okay. In 1931, Sarah died. And so she has now, been recognized as one of the leading Montana businesswomen, probably the only woman, and certainly the only African American woman to own a utility company way back then. But I wanted to talk about how this fits into sort of what I have as the Gutsy Dream System, the Gutsy Women Club. And I've when creating this, I broke things into the past, the present, and the future. And in the past, part of our job is to see how we fit into the stories that we tell ourselves. What's our history like? How has that shaped us? Shaped us, not determined our fate. So when you look at someone like Sarah, she's really orphaned at the age of 10, never sees her parents again. She goes off on her own at the age of 17 to Montana, knowing nobody, and has a very awful divorce to an abusive husband, has 3 children who all die before the age of 10. How do you overcome something like that? And I wish Sarah were here to speak to us today, to give us advice on how one overcomes that. But it's also a sign of the times. So I gave you that diphtheria statistic. The people died young. Children died frequently. And so you would have larger families because there was a pretty good guess that not everyone is going to make it into adulthood. So part of it is the age in which she lived, the era in which she lived. And also, a 17-year-old in the 1800s, or even a 12 or 13-year-old in the 1800s, was treated and really had to act as an adult. And so you see that huge, chasm between where we are today and where we were 200 years ago. For sure. But it's about remembering the past, learning from it, and being able to move on. So that's part of the challenge of being a gutsy woman. I want to talk about dreams because I am gonna bet that Sarah, at the age of 12, at the age of 18 even, old 18, didn't say to herself, you know what, one day I am going to own a utility company. I'm going to be a businesswoman. I'm going to, live out west. I'll bet she didn't have dreams like that. Everything is about opportunity. And so, yes, she had opportunities partly because she was married. So, a single woman would have to have a father's permission to do anything, to own anything. She was married, and she was also married to white men. And the Stephen Bickford certainly set up business, but she just wasn't a passive person in this. So she took her correspondence classes. She became a businesswoman. She became well respected. After his death, she went on to buy the rest of the shares of the utility company. So it's also about not just the resilience, it's about taking advantage of opportunities, but also getting the skills. Everything now seems kind of like planned out, but I'm sure at the time it wasn't. but she knew she needed the skills, and she was able to figure out how she was going to get those skills. So there's a lot of things that we can learn from Sarah Bickford. The other piece of it is that she just didn't do this for herself. She became a mentor. She became a mentor for other women. She became a very respected person in the community, and so she gave back. So that is the story of Sarah Bickford. I'd like to continue my Gutsy Women Wednesdays with stories of women that you may not have heard of, who went out and really defied convention, to get a divorce and to live your own life, to become a businesswoman when all the odds are stacked up against you. How does that happen? And so I want to give you some encouragement and make sure that, hey, you know what? The resources are out there. You got to take advantage of the resources. You have to look at what is inside of you. If it doesn't feel right, it's not right. Talk to yourself, to your heart, to your soul. Even when society tells you, well, you can't do this, you can't possibly get a divorce, you can't, go off and do this all by yourself. Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. Just be true to yourself. All right, that is the story of Sarah Bickford. Hey, if you have sort of an unknown hero or someone in your community, historically speaking, who has helped shape it and overcome the odds, let me know. I'd love to do some research and bring that story to you. So, all right, hey, please subscribe below. Gutsy Women Wednesday. Every day is Gutsy Women, right? Okay, guys, take care. Bye-bye.